Obama's speech tonight, former Vice President Cheney gave an interview primarily about Mr. Obama's Afghanistan plan, in which Mr. Cheney accused the U.S. president in legalese of treason, and revealed not for the first time that the vice president who failed to fight terrorism had instead personally succumbed to its most insidious aspect, panic. In a 90-minute interview yesterday with Politico, Mr. Cheney revealed that unlike authentically tough people, he is still so panicked that he still mistakes acting tough for being tough and makes the corollary error that failing to act tough implies that you are weak, because apparently in trashing America's president the day before a vital foreign policy speech, Mr. Cheney cannot conceive that displays of grace and humility might arise instead from actual grace and humility.
There's a guy without much experience who now travels around the world apologizing. I think our adversaries, especially when all of that's preceded by a deep bow to the head of government or whoever he's visiting, I think they see that as a sign of weakness.
What do you think when Nixon bowed to Hirohito? The guy is the president of the United States, and if as a former elected official you can't summon up just the boilerplate, grim respect your former responsibilities still demand, maybe you should just shut up, dick. Perhaps betraying just how effective terrorism has been against Mr. Cheney, he described himself as both worried and beginning to get nervous, blaming Mr. Obama's policies for his lack of nerve, his deficit of courage, despite the fact that his own doctor has said, quote, there was real fear throughout Mr. Cheney's office after 9/11. Former Vice President even imagines others feeling his fear, claiming Afghan citizens, after 8 years of Bush-Cheney dithering, will suddenly now switch sides out of fear if America says, as the president did tonight, it may one day leave. So cowardly is Mr. Cheney, in fact, that he trembles at the thought of an accused terrorist coming to New York City in chains. So lacking in faith is Mr. Cheney, or simply an understanding of America's strength, that he revealed he is afraid not of what a free terrorist might do, but of what a captured terrorist might say.
Our al-Qaeda adversaries out there are going to think that this is a great set of developments for their cause, because one of their top people will be given the opportunity, courtesy of the United States government and the Obama administration, to have a platform from which they can espouse this hateful ideology that they adhere to.
Which administration distributed and verified all those Osama bin Laden tapes? Sadly predictable, perhaps, that Mr. Cheney thinks a feeble, primitive, fear-based ideology would benefit from exposure. But Mr. Cheney went further in his critique of the Obama's administration decision to put Khalid Sheikh Mohammed on trial, claiming, quote, I think it's likely to give encouragement, aid, and comfort to the enemy. The U.S. Constitution defining giving aid and comfort to America's enemies as treason. Former Vice President of the United States accusing the current Commander-in-Chief on the eve of the presidential declaration about the way forward against the enemy of treason. Joining us tonight, retired U.S. Army Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, who served as Chief of Staff, Secretary of State Colin Powell, and is currently the Pamela Harriman Visiting Professor at the College of William and Mary. Thank you for your time tonight, Colonel.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
Can you think of anyone in our history who served as high as Mr. Cheney did in a U.S. administration accusing a sitting president of the legal definition of treason on the eve of a wartime speech to the American people and the troops and the allies and the enemies?
I think it would be difficult to find such an example in our history. Keith, I don't recognize this man anymore. He's not the man that I knew who was Colin Powell's boss when he was Secretary of Defense. He's a mystery to me.
Mr. Cheney was also asked whether his administration bears any responsibility for the current status of Afghanistan as a nation or as a problem today, and he replied, I basically don't. You were part of that administration. Do you basically don't as well?
Not at all. I saw Vice President Cheney, former Vice President Cheney's remarks as sort of being like Macbeth accusing the king of getting in the way of his lady's dagger. This is incredible that an administration that took its eye off as early as November 2001, Afghanistan, turned it into an economy of forced theater, told General Franks to concentrate on planning for Iraq, and then began shifting troops and other assets that were husbanded at best already towards Iraq, would now be accusing a president who inherited the mess they created of malfeasance in office. This is laughable, Keith.
You say you don't recognize him anymore. There was another thing in the interview that's a little bit off the main beaten path of the topic here, but he said that he believes Mr. Obama does not believe that the United States is special, quote, the greatest, freest nation mankind has ever known, and yet at the same time he's arguing, Mr. Cheney is, for secret prisons and for torture. Do you have a sense of what Mr. Cheney thinks makes America great and particularly free? I mean, is this just sort of knee-jerk nationalism, or does he even still get what America means and that the ideas of torture and freedom are pretty much mutually exclusive?
Well, you've hit the heart of the matter here. The power that we wield that is most formidable is the power of our ideas and our ideals lived up to on a day-to-day basis. No one in a long time has done a better job of restoring those ideals and restoring what they mean, rhetorically at least, than President Obama. I'm waiting for him. I'm waiting on tenterhooks for him to put action behind those words, and I'm giving him every benefit of the doubt that he will eventually do that. But I will not brook any opposition from the man who did more to damage those ideals and those ideas than anyone in our history, Dick Cheney.
Then contextualize your reaction to tonight's speech in that context. Did the president take the best option of a bunch of bad ones that were available to him? Could he have chosen a different path? What did you think of the speech?
I'd have to say that what he did was, in my mind, deliberate at some length, listening to all manner of advice from all manner of people. That's good. He didn't pull a .45 from his holster and shoot like the last administration did. I know. I was a member of it. He deliberated, and what he came up with was the least worst of a whole range of very bad possibilities. And that was reflected in the speech. It was very realistic. It was very sober and somber. And I think that was justified, given the audience and also given the degree of the challenge that this president and that audience confronts.
And do you think that this tone will be recognized by this country that has been used to, when the subject of war has been brought up in the last two presidential administrations, has really had the flag kind of thrust foremost into their face before any rational, calm, good points, bad points analysis of the situation has been offered to it?
Keith, I think that I continue to believe, as I think the president does, he probably wouldn't put it this low, that at least 75%, maybe 80% of the American people are sane, sober, pragmatic, and realistic. They seek the center, the radical center, if you will. And those people will understand the challenge the president faced and understand the speech he gave and the decision he's made. The proof of the pudding, of course, will be in the next 18 to 24 months. I'm really worried in that regard about the economic situation. The president has a real challenge there that in many ways is a bigger threat than Al-Qaeda or Afghanistan or Iraq or any other potential foreign threat.
Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, formerly Chief of Staff for Secretary of State Powell, now at the College of William and Mary. Always we benefit from your insight. Thank you again for it, sir.
Thanks, Keith.